And we're live. This is Mahabali from the American University in Cairo. I am the co-founder of Virtually Connecting. And today we are connecting with Haystack in British Columbia. And I'll ask the folks on site to introduce themselves first, and then we'll go to the virtual folks and we'll start talking about this awesome conference that's been talking about decolonizing. So go ahead, you guys.
Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Siko Bouters. Gosh, what do I want to say? I normally am down south of here in California, but today I'm lucky enough to be at Haystack. And with Adeli and some other fine folks, we coordinate a campaign called Whose Knowledge that's focused on making sure that all of us can be visible online and bring whatever knowledge it is that we choose to be there to be present.
Hi, everyone. This is Leslie Chan. I work at the University of Toronto, so it's always a good excuse to come out to the West Coast. And I work in the space of open access, open knowledge, open education as well.
Hello, everybody. My name is Perse Lewis, and I am a citizen of the Yamba Band of Shoshone Indians. And I just want to acknowledge that today we're joining you all from the traditional territory of the Musqueam people. So we just want to say thank you to them for hosting this conference and for allowing us to be on their lands. And I am the tribal liaison and a professor of practice in the Ethnic Studies Department at the University of San Diego.
And hello, I am Adeli. I am Brazilian, living in the United States by accident, and today really lucky to be here as well. First time in Vancouver, and first time actually meeting Percy and Leslie in person. And I'm also one of Whose Knowledge co-directors. Yeah, and I think that's good for now.
Hi, I'm
Oh, hang on a second. Sorry, okay. Yeah, go ahead, Christina, and then, okay.
Hendrik, I teach philosophy at the University of British Columbia, and yeah, I'm the on-site buddy for Virtually Connecting today.
And thank you, all of you guys, for making this happen. Fantastic idea.
Yeah, okay, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Oka. I'm an Indonesian living in London, doing my PhD, almost done, at Goldsmiths College, University of London, in the Visual Studies Department.
Can you raise the level of the volume? Is it possible?
Can you hear me now?
I don't know, your volume was much better at the beginning. I raised it from my side. Could you just, yes, better.
Okay, great. Sorry, not sure what was going on there.
Yeah.
Hi, okay. I'm Oka. I'm an Indonesian artist, writer, and PhD candidate in London. And I work a lot with transmedia, live streaming, and I'm very interested in virtually connecting. I'm glad that I've stumbled upon this through work.
So are we. I'm really excited to talk to you beyond this today. But for now, I'm going to ask folks virtually to introduce themselves. I'll do it in alphabetical order because that's the way they're ordered for me. So Colin, Daniela, Nate, Parisa, and Regina. Go ahead. Just a brief in.
Yeah, I'm Colin Madland, currently a PhD student at University of Victoria, just across the water from UBC, but currently living in Richmond. So I wish I could be there at Haystack, but I'm on child care duty today. I'm going to be in my PhD. I'm studying the kind of the intersection of Indigenous students and technology and open technologies, and how those two areas interact. So very much wish I could be there, but happy to make some connections here.
That's awesome. Hi, everybody. I'm so glad to be here. My name is Daniela. Hey, Leslie. I just graduated from my PhD in neuroscience at Oregon.
Yes, congratulations.
Congratulations.
University. Yes, still like the paperwork needs to be done, but like I'm just saying that it's done. And I also lead with two other wonderful women a project called Pre-Review, and we want to bring new voices that are underrepresented in scholarly communication to the space of peer review. And I'll leave it at that. So thanks for this opportunity.
Sorry, I lost the mute control there. I'm Nate Angel. I'm in Portland, Oregon, and I work with the organization Hypothesis that brings open source annotation technology to the world.
Hi, everyone. My name is Parisa. I'm a woman from Iran, and I'm based in Japan. I did my PhD at Osaka University on computer-assisted language learning, and I don't want to be included, so that's why I'm interested in virtually connecting and these sessions. I'm looking forward to learning from you today. Thank you.
Hi everyone. My name is Regina Gong. I am a librarian and an OER project manager at Lansing Community College in Michigan. And I am also a first-year PhD student in higher education at Michigan State University. So thank you.
Great.
And we have Autumn, who also joined us virtually. So I'll let her introduce herself, and then we'll talk to you guys about the conference.
Okay, just real quick. Hi, everybody. My name is Autumn Keynes. I'm an instructional designer at the University of Michigan, Dearborn, and I'm a last-minute ad. They put it in the Virtually Connecting Slack, and I slid in. So it's great to be here with all of you.
Glad you can make it, Autumn. I don't know if she said she's the co-director of Virtually Connecting. She might have forgotten to
I
say
didn't
that.
do that part. I'm sorry. Yes, I was trying to be quick. I'm quick. I am one of the things I'm most proud of is that I'm a co-director of Virtually Connecting.
Okay, folks. So Ansa, tell us how the conference has been. It sounds from Twitter like it's been amazing. And it looks like it's been living up to its values for the most part. So I'm really, really excited to hear about you guys, how your experience has been.
Well, I'll speak first. Yeah, so I think the conference has been really great. It's the first mainstream conference I've been to that really centered indigeneity in every single way. So all of the sessions, all of our plenary speakers have been indigenous to Canada, mainly. I guess we had one who was from the U.S. context, but yeah, it made me think like, okay, why don't other mainstream conferences do this? Because I think Haystack has really shown that you can do it in a really respectful way, and you can center indigeneity. Because I feel like every other conference they have the one plenary speaker who's native, right, or just a couple of sessions, and even those conferences that happen in places like Canada, where there is a heightened awareness of the First Nations people. Still, this conference has really done a great job doing that. So I've been really excited as an Indigenous person, right? Because when I go to those mainstream conferences and I do present, there'll be like 5 people, and then all the rest of the people will be Native people because they're there to support me and not really learn from me, right? Because we're like preaching to the choir. And this is the first time where I've ever really had this experience. So I hope that they can sort of set a precedence for other associations and organizations.
Yeah, in our panel yesterday, which was on critical digital and archival practices, it was majority people of color in the room, and the conversations afterwards lasted until half an hour after our session ended, and were really mutually supportive. Academics from different places, commiserating and giving each other resources and ideas. So that was really special. Yeah.
And I guess just building on what you both have said, the intersectional piece too, right? That the plenary speakers, right, have not only been Indigenous people, but largely also Indigenous women, right? Like it was just strong presence. And that feels all too rare.
Yeah, I think for me, right, like I'm also in awe with that, right? Like just coming here from, especially being Brazilian, right? And coming from a global South context, and then thinking about home and where, right, the First Peoples and Indigenous people are suffering right now with the current government, and just wondering, right, like how can we do more to really connect those realities, right? Like just not within North America, but also, right, like South America. So that is something that I'm also really inspired and thinking about how to make more of that.
Yeah, just building on that. So I was so impressed with all the panels, the keynotes in particular, as all of you mentioned, they're all Indigenous women, and they're all activist scholars in their own right. And what I was most impressed with is that nobody were complaining or anything of that nature. They tell you the history, they tell you their personal experience as they're situated in that history, and they tell you what they're doing about it. And this is why it's so inspiring, because this is really all about actions and community. It's all about how we could work with each other and care for each other. And that to me was such a different type of experience from most academic conferences. It's really about everybody showing themselves off, how much I know, more than you know, and that kind of thing. So this conference to me was so much about really sharing common experiences and history and all that. So some of those keynotes literally blew my mind. I was in tears a couple of them. So it was just so amazing.
Well, the personal stories,
Yeah.
right? The way that folks brought themselves, their families, right? Photos of grandmothers and children, the next generation, like that has felt really useful. And I'm a non-academic, and so I often, you know, if I'm going to a more academic conference space, I'm never sure, like, will I be comfortable? Will I have anything to offer? You know, what will that feel like? And, but, you know, when folks are really rooted in their own stories and context, it, you know, I know for me, it's a connection point, which I really, feel grateful for.
Yeah, I loved, I was speaking earlier about how Marisa Elena Duarte's plenary was so emotional for so many of us. And, you know, coming from Indonesia, I also wasn't sure how I would fit in, but her questioning of just asking us all, who do you belong to? Who do you want to liberate? Those two questions, I think every single person in the room, I mean, she deserved that standing ovation because it really made us all individually contextualize what we're doing.
Yeah, her book is called Network Sovereignty, Connecting the Indian Country. So if you haven't read the book, I just ordered it, and I taught courses on that topic, and I'm ashamed that I didn't know about the book, but I'm so looking forward to reading it.
Can someone tweet out the book or write it in the chat or something?
Thank you.
What is it? What is
It's
the
called
name?
Network Sovereignty.
I think Christina's gonna tweet it.
Yeah.
I think other people have tweeted about it too. So if you do a search of hashtag 2019, I think her name will show up. Her book will show up. Yeah.
And I also wanted to bring up the other plenary from Alana Sayer. And that was equally brilliant and amazing, and she really also, right, like brought, like she said, yeah, I'm here not only to make you think, but to make you feel, and bring the humanness back, right, to center the human again, and that was really amazing. So just to also bring her to the room and the conversation.
Well, we have our session is called Whose Knowledge, obviously, but Elena Sayer's keynote really brought home the struggle many Indigenous students and scholars have to face, or marginalized people have to face. We take for granted, we go into a program, we can study what we would like to study. She was telling us about how she composed, she wanted to do a PhD in literature. And she composed a list of Indigenous literature, and it was vetted by many different Indigenous scholars from around the world, but her own department refused or rejected that list of readings as being acceptable for her PhD exam. right? Because there were no recognizable white authors in it. So that was really hit home about how the institutions are still so behind, or so much enclosed in terms of that colonial structure. Yeah.
She's doing like it is the PhD via special arrangement, so then she can use that.
Yes.
Right?
Mm-hmm. You know, this reminds me of there's a Palestinian educator called Munir Fesha, and he I think he did his PhD at Harvard or something, but he was saying half of his sources were traditional peer-reviewed sources, and then the other half of his sources were oral sources. And he would say, my mother is one of my sources. And they were like, no, you can't do that. And I was thinking that a lot of indigenous knowledge is not documented in ways that are recognized, obviously. And so whoever decided that this was how we recognize knowledge has already created that problem at those higher levels, obviously. And we all know that. But, does anyone who's joining virtually have any questions or comments? I kind of, if everyone's feeling like I'm feeling kind of in awe, and I want to hear more about the conference and what it was like. But does anyone have any questions or thoughts to share? Anything you saw on the hashtag?
Because I came in late, usually I'm a better virtual participant, and I actually look up the people that we're going to be talking with, that I learn about their work. Maybe you could tell us a little bit more about your work or what you presented on.
Sorry, who are you speaking to?
Everyone who's at the conference. So you sort of mentioned what you talked about, but not in detail. So if you could say a little bit more.
With some of the work that you're studying, your research, what you're presenting on at the conference, that would be great. I'd love to learn more about you.
Okay, I'll just briefly summarize what I presented yesterday. So my talk was called Indigenous Species and Ana Infinite. The importance of anti-ableism as integral to decolonizing the arts and art education. I'm a disabled artist, writer, and scholar, so accessibility, but also disability justice has been really central to a lot of my work. So Indigenous Species is a book that I wrote and illustrated. I wish I had it right here with me. I have it in another room. I might show you later, but it is in the cited version. I call it a cited version. It has fake Braille on every left-hand side to show us sighted people that there should be Braille, and that the publishing industry is inequitable. And then Ana Infinite is my PhD project, which is I've been doing performance installations and projections and digital art as well, using science fiction, fantasy, poetry around this figure of Ana the Javanese, or Ana la Javanese, and she was an Indonesian, supposedly Indonesian girl, painted by Paul Gauguin, 1893 or 1894. But what's interesting is that all the Western art historical knowledge about her is basically all fictional, because they all say different things about her ethnicity. So she's described as Polynesian, Sinhalese, Javanese. It's like they don't know what kind of brown she is, but yet all of these contradicting accounts are seen as like canon, which is bizarre. So I'm just really playing with that.
That's fascinating. Thank you so much for sharing. And remind me of your name. I'm sorry again, I was late.
Oh, that's okay. Kairani Baroka, but you can call me Oka.
Okay, it's wonderful to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
Yeah, I think stuff that I'm interested in is sort of similar. So I'm really interested in Indigenous knowledges in all contexts. But the work that we sort of talked about on the panel is the Wikipedia editing that I have my students do. So I have my students work with local community, American Indian community people to write Wikipedia articles. And sort of that under that same heading of like this canon and where knowledge comes from, and how even now as Indigenous people, the academy, some institutions are trying to provide more space for that, but then we're still required to cite, right, these old dead white Europeans pretty much. And so I come across that a lot within the Wikipedia space, where you have these not even academics, but oftentimes it'll be like these hobbyist historians and anthropologists that were able to get books published in the early 20th, mid 20th century that form the foundation of the citations that I see within the Wikipedia space. So it's very rare that I, look at pages that have to do with Native American people in the U.S. context, where the citations are really valid citations. So the work that I've sort of been trying to do is looking at how can I write and get the work published in spaces where then I can use it to like support these online knowledge spaces, right? So I'm currently working on a book chapter on California Indian women, and really looking at women within San Diego from local tribes that have really been pushing for change within the higher education context. And really, I want to publish just so that I can create Wikipedia pages for them, and then I'll have valid citations. I everyone here.
Yeah.
It has become my whole life. I never cared about it before, and now I'm like obsessed with it.
So you actually have to go through the long traditional route in order to make the open route possible for you. That's
I know, it's so bizarre, but
it's so counterintuitive.
I find when I talk to, I work a lot with the community and Native students, and in K through 12, I mean, they're, doing book reports in 4th grade, or not book reports, but like these mini research reports in 4th grade, and they're using Wikipedia, right? So like they're talking about their own people as being primitive hunter and gatherers because they read it on Wikipedia. So, I had my cousin just call me last week because she's in 6th grade and she's doing this report, and she was like repeating to me her report, and I'm like, that's not correct information on your people, And then she said, well, I have to include someone famous from our tribe, and she's like, there's nobody. And I said, your great grandmother created our reservation. Like she's famous. She secured us our territory.
Yeah.
But she's not on Wikipedia. She's not anywhere online, right? So then it makes her invisible. And so even though I don't feel like I necessarily would be engaging in this space, like because I want to, it's like I kind of feel like I have to at this point, right? Because I know and I'm seeing these things, and it's like oftentimes as activists, it's like, why do we do it? Because we can. And I feel like that about this work that I'm doing in online spaces.
Yeah. Mari Zwick Matrier is part of a project called Dalit History Month, and she was on our panel as well, but wasn't able to be here for this session. And as you probably know, the Dalits are those formerly and pejoratively known as the untouchables in India. And Mari was also kind of, talking about this kind of circuitous route of taking oral community knowledge, right? And sort of, finding ways to formalize it, right? Get it written down, get it deposited and housed then in, an academic library, say, so that that too can be, cited in spaces like Wikipedia, and that sort of, that full circle. Really interesting.
Well, I've been interested in so-called open access for a number of years, and of course, in the early days, we have the naive assumption that if you have open access, then you will reduce the kind of inequality and invisibility of a lot of the knowledge that has been marginalized in other parts of the world. But of course, as I learned more recently, there are so many barriers and structural problems, structural issues that make a lot of knowledge invisible, right? The kind of things that we'd all talk about at this conference about the history of indigenous people in this country, the residential school, the conscious epistemicide, the killing of local indigenous knowledge, and all these kind of things were active acts of erasing other people's knowledge. And so open access doesn't change that. Open access only addressed a very surface issue of a very elite group of knowledge. And to me now, increasingly, the elite group of knowledge is really quite irrelevant in terms of addressing the world problem, the kind of divide, the kind of inequality, the kind of climate crisis that we face. We need to somehow liberate the community knowledge that we can share with each other, because ultimately what's going to save us really is going to be how we care for each other, not how the system of elite knowledge is going to be preserved or produced by a very elite group of people, whether it's open access or not, right? And so community-based knowledge, I learned more and more the kind of what I learned today about reciprocal accountability, the mutual respect, the reciprocity, the community caring. That's what we need to build into our knowledge system, so that we learn from each other, from the world over. The kind of diversities that we should have has been sort of put to the background, right? So we need to bring those diversity back, and we need to rethink how we value whose knowledge really counts, right? That's
and I just want to add that for us, right, like being here as whose knowledge, it was really for convening, right? Convening this panel and bringing Mari, Leslie, and Percy to have that conversation, because we cannot have this conversation, right, like enough. We need more of that, and that was our role today. And I think really framing it as decolonizing knowledge, right, and the open knowledge, right, like open for whom and by whom, right? So really asking those questions and then chatting with their work and what they're doing and learning from them and with them.
I have a question, actually. I wish I had been on your like sitting in on your panel. So I hope you don't mind if I ask a little bit about it. I was wondering if what your thoughts were on privacy and security for Indigenous groups, especially because a lot of times there are mining companies or oil companies or, Nestle or whoever, who would try to co-opt community knowledge and try to use Indigenous knowledge for corporate benefit, and whether there are safeguards or firewalls for that. I'm just curious if that came up.
Yeah, I mean, I think you bring up a good point. My territory, I'm Western Shoshone, so my Indigenous territory is almost all of the state of Nevada, which is where Barrick, a Canadian mining company, is, pulling out probably billions by now in gold ore, and really tearing apart our landscape and poisoning our lands. And I think you bring up a really good point, because the way that they have been able to do what they're doing is also by like exploiting us and prostituting us in many ways, right? So they created this foundation that provides scholarships to Western Shoshone students. And my tribes, we're in Nevada, we don't have a lot of economic, I guess we could have mining companies if we were like that. But so we don't have a lot of economic development. A lot of other tribes in the US have been able to, have casinos, while Nevada gaming is legal. So that's not an option for any of us. So what Barrick has been able to do is to really prey on us with the fact that they have money. And so I think, when I think about that, I think about that I do kind of have to be careful, because I don't risk myself, because I don't rely on Barrick paychecks, but I risk my family, right? And especially when I'm doing this work, I go under, Perse Lewis. Hooper is my maiden name to designate my band affiliations. And, my cousin had told me one time, you should think about this, because all of my family works for Barrick, right? My cousins receive Barrick scholarships. Hooper is a very well-known name. And so I think, you bring up a good point. I haven't really thought a lot about it, because I don't want to center Barrick in any of my conversations, really. Yeah. But it is a valid point. And as I start to try to write more, it's possible that could happen. And so I think that's a real, sort of red flag that I should be thinking about more.
Percy, are you on Twitter? Because we're trying to get your Twitter handle so we can stay in touch and, let people know that you're here.
Yeah, no, I'm not on Twitter.
Okay.
I know. Maybe Percy Day. Maybe Percy Day. I feel like at some point told me I was like I should create a. I always teach.
We
them.
had that conversation at one point. If
Maybe
Perse's
Perse
on
gay.
Twitter, she's not really on Twitter.
I feel like I follow Eve Tuck though.
For that, you should get on
I also just want to ask how long you guys are willing to stay, just because we often talk around 30 minutes, but if you're willing to
That's
stay
it,
longer,
30 minutes?
If you're willing to stay longer, it's up to you.
Wow. I'm game.
Little longer.
Sure.
You're welcome to stay as long as you can, and if one of you wants to leave, that's fine. We can still keep going.
Yeah, I think I might have to go, but it was really nice to meet all of you, and I hope to keep in touch in some way. Thanks
Yeah.
for sharing.
Yes, please. Let's do that.
Bye.
Thank you.
Hey, I had a question. I was listening to y'all talk so much about the difficulties of having the indigenous voice actually appear in all these superstructures of especially academic and Wikipedia sort of publications. And I'm wondering, is there also a tension with not wanting to be recorded or not wanting to have the indigenous sort of culture be sucked into those frameworks? Is there a tension between that and the desire, of course, to be heard and to matter in that world? If that's a crazy question, then I'm willing to withdraw it too.
I mean, so whose knowledge? One of the ways that we think about maybe a form of that tension, and you can tell me if this resonates with what you're actually asking or not, but is thinking about, how do we balance open and safe, right? Because so many sort of open spaces come from this colonizer's model of extraction, right? Where everything is open, but it means I'm always taking everything from you, right? And there's no reciprocity. And because we work with so many, marginalized community activists around the world where safety is a legitimate concern, right? Something very real and serious can happen to people and their families. So we're constantly having to sort of hold both of those as true, and both of those ends as important to be thinking about and balancing. And I guess one of the sort of principles that helps us navigate, in that spectrum is consent, right? That before we have put together a panel and a conversation, right, to check with folks and go, okay, do we have consent for your image to be shared, right? Maha started this conversation with, is there consent to live stream on YouTube, right? Any of those pieces, but then also if you carry that into knowledge, right? Sort of one of our principles is like, well, I can't decide what Shoshone or Kumeyaay knowledge belongs on Wikipedia, right? That would be sort of absurd. What do I know? And so to bring that piece of consent as well, right? For us, the practice is then to center the communities themselves to figure out, gosh, what are our priorities, right? What does the Dalit community decide they want to be sharing online, and where, right? And what don't they? And then our job as allies and co-conspirators is to respect those boundaries and to sometimes ask for consent 3 or 4 times, to be kind of almost annoying and pedantic about it because it matters.
I have a similar question, and it has to do more with the idea of consent, but also the importance of open platforms. Like Nate is involved with Hypothesis, which is open source, and WordPress is another example where you can, people can take these platforms and customize them to suit their needs and how they want to present themselves online. I'm wondering if you guys have had thoughts around that.
Well, I think a quick comment. So the word is open itself is always has to be contextualized. So when you use the word open access, open source, or these kind of different way about open knowledge, they're all different contexts, right? So the kind of open that you're talking about, for example, of WordPress, Hypothesis, these are technology references, right? So whether the technology itself is open to modification, open to sort of different types of reuse and all those kind of things. So there's kind of technical openness. I think our problem often get conflated is that we conflate that technical openness with that kind of ethical dimension of openness. Like whether do you have consent for someone to use your information, right? Is it open for use? Like, is your land open to ours? Is the air open? And all those kind of things. Those are both philosophical and political questions, right? And so I think often we conflate them, or we don't give enough attention to actually questions that are political in nature. We think that they're technical, and we give technical solution to complex political problem. And that we think, oh, we solved the problem, but we actually amplify the problem.
Can I ask a bit of a naive question, mostly to Perse, because obviously with my context, the general idea of decolonizing is very close to my heart, but my understanding of indigenous populations in North America is not very deep. And when I heard about the TK licenses, I thought that was such a great example of, you know, a different way of open licensing that is built on indigenous people's way of knowing. And one of the things I noticed is that there's some of the licenses are kind of like, no, this knowledge can only be shared within a tribe or within a particular community, but not outside of it. And I was wondering about, is that because some of that knowledge is sacred, or because the context won't be understood outside the community? Or is it because out of a fear of exploitation? Because sometimes knowing more about someone can allow a colonizer to sort of exploit that rather than. So I was just wondering, or maybe not one of those things, maybe for each tribe it's a different thing. So I was wondering if you have any insights into that you could share.
Yeah, so yes to everything that you said. I think there's all of those concerns. There's this great new book called Digital Bundle that I've been reading, and she sort of separates knowledges into two categories, right? So like sacred knowledge is that knowledge that, yeah, it probably shouldn't be online, like ceremonial knowledge and things like that. But at the same time, it is a tribal decision, right? That's part of sovereignty. So part of sovereignty is tribes deciding for themselves what knowledges go into these open spaces. And just, you know, also in the US context, we're often homogenized as Native Americans. But when we're talking about Native Americans, you know, we're really talking about 574 now federally recognized tribes with over 100 other state recognized tribes. So we're very diverse. And so I think some tribes have decided to create websites. Some families have decided to create websites. I think that there should be funding for us to create these platforms. Because one thing that I've been researching lately is Native American curriculum and how it is becoming a policy, right? So in the US, we have 25 states, now 26, because California's governor recently signed into legislation a Native American curriculum, not requirement, but how do they term it? It's not a requirement, they're encouraged, right? So a lot of this legislation encourages school districts to adopt a Native American curriculum. In California, it's for grades 7 through 12. The state's supposed to be working with tribes to create the curriculum, but every state has something different. And what we're really seeing is that schools are not adopting the curriculum. If they adopt the curriculum, they're not including sovereignty and self-determination, right? So they're actually not even including the political context, which for us in the US context is what makes us Native American, right? We're a political identity. So it continues to reinforce this settler colonial idea about where we are placed within society, and where they want to place us is in the past, right? So for example, Nevada, where I'm from, they passed legislation to require this curriculum. So I was thinking, okay, if you're a teacher and you're looking for a curriculum, what are you going to find? Well, what you're going to find is the Parks and Recreation Department had some non-native anthropologists come in and create these worksheets that students can do that I think are more harmful than helpful, right? So I was thinking, like, what if the state actually released monies to the tribes to create these online curriculums, right? That centered how we think about ourselves. Like, what could that look like, and how could that really fulfill the intention of these policies, if that is the intention of the policy? Because maybe it's not, maybe it's just right to ease settler guilt or something like that. But you know, I think for tribes that these online spaces can be really powerful. And I think about, even for myself, like how can you know, creating a WordPress website or something, how can that help, you know, further the work that I do? But I think oftentimes it's really about resources. And I think if tribes had the resources, then they could think about, okay, what do we want to refuse in this process? And, you know, and what do we want to put out there? But I think right now, you know, our tribes, they're running full governments responsible for all aspects of their infrastructure. So then this online space becomes something extra. And I really think that if these states are going to pass this legislation, then they also have to fund it.
Yeah, just to complicate what Percy said even more. So in Canada, the situation is still different, right? And so in Canada, there are over 100 nations. And then of course we have the whole territory, the Nunavut, which have a self-government. And so these are all a result of different historical treaties and different kind of local history as well. So so as great as some of the ideas behind, let's say, the traditional labor project, Mukutu, it doesn't cover the kind of diversity of community across the continent, right? But the point being that there shouldn't be one group that impose a set of standards on everybody else. That these communities should be able to come up with their own way of telling their story, and that we need to think about common infrastructure in a way that people could adapt them to tell their own story, right? And share the basic resources without having to be given or be held prisoner by these infrastructure like Facebook and Google, because that's one size fits all, right? And so the resource question is important, the infrastructure is important, but how do we build infrastructure that accommodate real diversity is also the issue.
That's exactly what I was wondering, and I just didn't ask the question well. Thank you for and asking and answering my question. That was great. Thank you.
No, that's good. That's great.
Yeah, wrap it up.
Yeah.
I think we need to wrap up.
Okay. Thank you all so much. Any last minute questions before everyone leaves? Okay. Thank you so much for taking the time and for sharing with us. And I hope you can stay in touch beyond today.
Well, I want to thank you all for all taking the time.
Thank you.
You were up very late, we know. So thank you.
Thank you. Take care. Have a good rest of the day.
Bye.
I'll hang out online for 5 more minutes in case virtual folks want to talk, but you guys on site can go have a good. Thank you so much again.
Have a great conference.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, Daniela.
Bye, Leslie. You all alleviated my FOMO a little bit, so thanks so much. Bye.
Bye.
Aw, virtually connecting.
Okay, I'll stop the broadcast if we're going to get into the all moments.
Oh,